being clear on what our intention is for how we want to show up, or what it is that we are yearning for, points the attention, orients our organism towards receiving, as well as being in the intention. A lot of meditation practices start the meditation with having a clear intention. Whether it's a concentration practice where we're choosing the intention to stay with the breath, so that anytime the attention goes elsewhere, we bring it back. And as we forget and reawaken to what the intention is, we reorient back our action towards that intention. This is a fundamental meditation practice, because what we soon discover when we're going into meditation is we actually don't have much agency over our attention, meaning we wander off over and over. We forget what it is that we set out to do. And the reawakening back to consciousness and the reawakening back to choice is the gift that is also possible. And so having clarity about where we want to go when we reawaken is important. And so establishing the attention can be a valuable way to serve as a compass. That as I'm going through my day, am I still with my intention? Or have I deviated? Can I bring myself back in alignment with that intention? And be compassionate and realistic that I will forget that intention and I will deviate, because that is the human state. We come in and out of consciousness. But having clarity about that intention can be a great experiment to run to see how your life, how what unfolds is different than when we don't have clarity about that intention. So it can be an experiment that we play with. One of the things that I have recently started experimenting with in the morning is using the meditation as a place to listen to what it is that the fullness of myself wants. So instead of the intention being a cognitive exercise where I conceptualize, or the mind says, okay, here's this phrase I want to remember throughout the day, which has its value. I have been every morning asking so that there's a sense of freshness and authenticity. Sweetheart, what is it that you want today? What is it that matters? What is it that underneath it all is the most important thing for you? And can you show me how to serve that want, that purpose? Show me how to do that. Help me remember, because I will forget. And with this exercise, there are emotions that come for me as a result of that. There's a real sense of tenderness. There's a real sense of interest and care. And there's also a sense of grief for how I've wanted this for so long. I've ached for someone to ask me, what is it that you need? And show me how I can give that to you. And what I have found out is that through this practice that I have, I'm able to do that for myself. I'm not depending on others or hoping that they can read my mind to know what it is that I want and then figure out how to give it in a way that I want to receive it. I'm taking responsibility for that. And it's not to say that I don't want to receive that from others, but I am orienting myself towards what it is that matters. I'm being clear about that. I am acknowledging that I have the capacity to meet those needs myself. And at the same time, I'm also orienting the attention to be able to notice when those opportunities arise from the external world. And so having clarity about what it is that we want, or what's our intention for the day, how do I want to move through the day? Today, I want to move through the day and view life through the lens of love. So it doesn't matter what happens. Even if there's aggression that's directed at me, even if there's confusion, when I wake up back to my own consciousness, when I have agency over where my attention goes or how I react or respond to that particular incident, can it be through the lens of love? Because I know that through that lens, I am showing up in my fullness. And the repetition helps create habit. And having a clear intention and a practice every day of starting the day with that intention starts to make it that it no longer needs to be a conscious act. This is the mysterious thing about how our brain works and consciousness. What we repeat over and over becomes habit and then no longer requires consciousness, choice. And there's a positive aspect to that, which is I can train myself to orient towards life in a particular way that is skillful and that is constructive and that builds presence, connection, not just for myself, but for everybody around me. Or if I repeat over and over certain thoughts or actions, that too can become unconscious habit. And if those are unskillful, I won't notice that I'm doing it until after the fact, because this organism has this incredible capacity to learn. It's very good at doing it. And so refreshing our intention every day or any moment during the day, doesn't matter, is helpful, because what we're doing is we are teaching ourselves how to show up in a way that is in deep alignment with what we value. And that changes, of course, moment to moment. We can refresh those intentions. And that intention will also be reinforced by outcome. So an important part of this process is not just setting the intention, but really celebrating when we see what the outcome is. Allowing us to feel the fullness of all the emotions that arise when there is connection, when there is presence. And pointing the attention to when we are able to be with intention versus focusing the attention when we were not. because that's another thing that happens in meditation practice. We can notice this bias. Oftentimes, when we wake up from our daydreaming or wandering off, what's the message that comes? Is it, oh, I'm awake again? Or is it, oh God, I wandered off again. I'm no good at this. How are we meeting the impact of what happens? Are we meeting it with a focus on what worked? Or are we paying attention to what's not working? Because even in how we relate to that becomes a habit. So it's not just about setting the intention, it's also about really celebrating when we are in alignment with that intention versus focusing when we're not. And understanding, once again, that we have very little agency or choice. So that when we're not, it's because we are running on old programming. The programming that we probably want to change in the first place. And to appreciate the innocence and the sincerity behind setting the intention versus the inability to always be conscious and act from that place of intention. There's something very powerful about what we choose as intention. That if we set the intention to be a value versus a specific, there are more opportunities to fulfill that intention. So if my intention is of being in self-compassion, having compassion towards myself, versus not engaging with the inner critic. There are more ways for me to fulfill self-compassion than there would be if I were to be very specific of I'm not engaging with the inner critic. So there's value in that. Not to say that it's a problem to be very specific. Sometimes what we want to do is to address a very specific aspect of our experience. But I also want to say that it's not just about conceptualizing what it is that we're wanting. Part of setting the intention is being with the process of setting the intention. So if I'm using self-compassion for an example, when I am saying I want to be with more self-acceptance and more self-compassion with myself, there is something that emerges as I say that within the organism. There might be emotions, there might be thoughts. And so as I'm going through this process, what would it be like to meet whatever is coming up around that with interest and care? Because our organism is going to respond to what it is that we are wanting. And in that response is valuable information. And also valuable feelings that maybe have not gotten to be expressed and acknowledged. So the process itself in setting the intention also has incredible value, a potential for healing, a potential for clarity. And then the intention setting can also be very simple. right? Before I go into the house after a full day of work, and I know my spouse is inside, I might set a really quick intention of like, how do I want to show up? Do I want to show up tired and cranky and reactive? Or do I want to actually spend some time out here? Maybe I'm going to sit down on the doorstep for 5 minutes and just reconnect with myself so that when I am showing up, I am showing up with the fullness of my attention and my heart. If I'm going into a difficult meeting and I'm feeling scared or a lot of pressure, how do I want to show up? Do I want to show up in dysregulation and anxiety? Or do I want to show up with the capacity to listen and to be connected to wisdom? And so we can do just the small practice of just stopping and noticing that we have a choice in any given moment and being able to verbalize what that is, whether that it's internally or even out loud. That in itself is enough. We can go into the next moment, even if we forget it's set in place somewhere in the unconscious. So we don't have to be obsessive also about remembering. The act itself is a gift. And the act itself is a habit that we're starting to develop. That each moment as I transition from one place to another, or from one person to another, or a circumstance to a new one, just remembering that I can actually decide how it is that I want to show up. And then at the same time, let go of like whether I'm capable of doing that or not, because that is way more beyond just conscious choice. Because oftentimes we're not conscious. Oftentimes we lapse into unconsciousness. That in itself is beautiful. And to celebrate the beauty of that, the earnestness of that, so that we don't get fixated on outcome. Can you imagine what life would be like if we were being more conscious about the ability to set intentions, and we were engaging with this process? How would your life be if there were more intentionality in it? Who would you be? Who do you want to be? How do you want to show up for yourself, for others? What if you could? I want to find out. The willingness matters more. This is another way to view the word intention. Intention is about willingness. It's not about actually doing the action. It's about the willingness or the wanting to. And it's almost like we are protected just by being in the willingness. That is the most important step, is to be willing or wanting, because it sets everything else in motion. And we don't know what that motion is going to be like. So we set the intention and you let go of what the outcome is. Because the moment that you have an expectation on the outcome, or there's a fixation on the outcome, that in itself takes away from the attention being with the intention or the willingness of it. And that's the part that's beautiful. It's the part of you that generated that intention. That's the part that was in fullness. The part that's in expectation or is fixated on outcome is not your full self. That's your conditioned self. So being with the intention is being with our fullness. It's making choices from a place of wholeness versus trying to control or navigate with our contracted self, our smaller self.